Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining our speaker support session today. My name is Jen Wilson. You have probably heard from me ad nauseum all year long. I'm the Director of Programming and Advocacy with the New England Museum Association, and I am joined by my colleague, Heather Riggs.
Hi.
Uh, we are so excited to have you here today, and we have a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to get started. I have a presentation. I'm going to try to zip through it and then have time at the end for Q&A. And yeah, hopefully we can cover all the questions you have. And yeah, I'll just pop over to my slide deck. All right, can folks see that? Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Looks good. Still
Okay, great.
on preview mode though.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I got a little pop-up saying that there is bypass X. So great. All right. There we go. All right. So first and foremost, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We literally cannot do conference without you. This year we have about 70 sessions, and from my estimate, over 200 speakers that are presenting wonderful content across all different areas of the museum. We have speakers from all 6 New England states and beyond. So we do have a few people who are flying in for our conference this year. And conference is made up by you and the work that you're doing and your willingness to be in a room with people sharing your expertise and your perspective. So thank you. You're doing something that's fun and amazing, and you make conference really the worthwhile thing that everybody wants to come to. And the NEMA conference is one of the regional conversations that happen. There are a number of these regional museum associations, and ours happens to be, I think, the best, but it's also the largest in the country for regional organizations. And that's made up from the energy that you bring. So thank you for what you're doing. And I'm so excited to see you all in person in just 50 some odd days. So our game plan for today, we are going to talk a little bit about the prep work that you are doing over the next few weeks. Then we'll segue into sharing is caring. So some helpful tips for delivering your content day of. This year I've built in some helpful hints about what to expect in the room, some just gentle reminders as you're, you're packing your bags and you're getting ready to present. And then I'll share our contact information before we segue into our Q&A. All right, so for prep work, building your presentation in advance, I've broken this up into a few different things to consider. But first, the thing I want you to keep in mind as you are building your presentation is that your presentations are as much about what you are doing as they are about how the audience receives them. So the prep work that you're doing and formatting your presentations and writing your notes, it's as much to support yourself and to showcase what you're doing in the field and for your organization, as much as it is about the audience that's taking that and receiving that, right? So I come from a theater background. You actors can put on a show, but if it doesn't have an audience, is it really a performance, right? So we like to think about, for presentations, how best to support our audience to receive in as many easy, accessible ways as possible all of the content that you're going to share with them. So some things to consider as you are putting together slides and videos and such. So first and foremost is the format. So as you're developing your your style for your slides, some basic ground rules. So font is better if it's at least 28 point or larger. You can play with that. You can have title slides that are bigger. You can have, if you have quotes or bullet points like I do, they can be a little bit smaller. And also I'd recommend using sans serif and avoiding things that are like serif display and handwriting fonts. So sans serif are really the basics: Helvetica, Arial, and avoiding. You can see an example right here of a sans serif versus a serif, which has like the little, like, I always call them like tails on them, tails and hats, or script fonts or display fonts for the predominant use of in your slides. So like, let's say you have bullet points like this, I would use something sans serif. If you have title slides, you can get a little fun and fancy. The reason for that is partly when human eyes are reading something on the screen, it takes more energy for the eye to read a serif font or a script. It just, like, there's something about like the little add-on bits to those fonts. So it just makes it easier on the user end, on the viewer, to look at a sans serif. It's easy computing. Also, for anybody that has low vision, or they forgot their glasses, there's less stuff on the font to get muddy, right? So if you're at a distance and you're not, let's say I'm not wearing my glasses. If I'm looking at a serif font and I'm at the back of the room, it's a kind of like, is that a and then insert letters like, am I confusing this for that? So it just makes it easier on the attendees side. And especially because we have 3 days of sessions, especially if you have a Friday session, people are going to have been through a lot of presentations. Conference is great, but people, they get a little tired of all of the information. So this is a way to just make that easier. I also recommend more space in your formatting, and I'll show you what that means on the next slide. But if you have chunks of text, if you have lists, just giving some breathing room between spaces or between lines, that'll just help again with that bleed over from one line to the next. It gives just some clarity in the lines. It means that if you have that additional space, you're not like throwing a bunch of stuff on one slide and that it becomes almost incomprehensible, and you'll see that in a second. And then as you're also thinking about your formatting, considering the colors that you're using. So I recommend using like a light background and a dark text. That's what I'm doing here. So this is like a light mustardy yellow with, this is actually purple, or then conversely like a dark background with a light text. So these high contrasts, I would avoid using red text and a bright yellow background. By bright yellow, I mean like highlighter yellow. It's kind of the default yellow that you'll see. That can be really jarring, especially if you're looking at that for a slide with a lot of text on it. It's okay for displays or for title cards, if you will. But like if you're looking at just like bright yellow, a background, and you're trying to decipher the text, it can be a little tough. And then if you're interested in seeing like, playing with that format and seeing if it's accessible to the user end, you can go to the websites that'll check your contrast for you. So one that I like to use is contrastchecker.com. And you input the background color and the font color, and it'll give you a point scale actually of like, this is easy and accessible to read at like this font size, bigger or smaller. And if it would pass, website regulations from that come down from the government. All right, so what do I mean by some of this? So this slide is a dark background, a lot of red text, serif font. It's pretty chunky. So this is our theme for this year. I just pulled this from the website. There's not a lot of spacing in between the lines. And as you're looking at this, your brain is probably going like, where do I start? Like I can read the first top line, the wellness check, a holistic view of museums in the first quarter century, but then like it starts to blur together and you're looking at it probably on your laptop or your desktop. You're not sitting in a room kind of like, maybe dodging heads a little bit or taking notes. So this is what I recommend people to avoid doing. If for some reason like you want to put a lot of text on there, like let's say you have a chunk of a quote that you're using, totally fine. I would put the chunk in, give it some breathing room. So like what's the actual necessary part that you need to highlight, and then make sure that that text is bolded somehow, and then you're driving home like, here's this, here's a paragraph of text, but we're going to focus on this one sentence and make sure that one sentence is bolded, or maybe a different color, some way to signify to the audience of like, this is where we're like, I'm going to help you visually narrow into this thing. So in considering the content in the text, less is better. So I recommend, as I said earlier, focusing on those key points, the ones that support your goal. So if you have bullet points like this, I'm doing a lot of talking around each bullet point, but you can get a sense of what I'm going to talk about based on that. Or like in the previous slide, if you have like a paragraph of text and you want to use that paragraph for context, but you have one smaller bit that you want to focus on, highlighting that. But effectively, your presentation is there for the attendees to look at, and you can have supporting notes on the other side. Sometimes speakers like to use their presentation as they're like, I'm going to look at the presentation and I'm going to read it to the people in the room. We try to avoid that. So less is better. So you're going to make sure that it's the key points that you need, And that supports people like I take too many notes. I'm a note taker in presentations. I try to write down whole slides. It's a bad habit I have. It was like gold star high school student mentality. So that means that like if you do have somebody that is trying to take a lot of notes and like write down everything on your slide, they're focusing on the content. They can write notes around it, and they're focusing on what you're saying and not just copying. Additionally, I also recommend road mapping. So people like to know where they're going. I think that it's helpful at the beginning of presentations to give a quick outline. You don't need to cover every single bullet point, but I think if you're just like, in this 90 minutes, we're going to talk about these three things. That just gives people a sense of like what that time is going to look like. And that supports a number of different users or different attendees. So let's say you have somebody who is it happens, they're bopping from one presentation to another. They're looking at what you're going to say and they're kind of going like, okay, I'm going to stay for the first half of this and then I'm going to try to get to this other session. We have a number of sessions. I try my best to work out the schedule, but sometimes people want to go to two things at the same time. We haven't invented cloning at NEMA, although I'd really like to. So sometimes, giving that roadmap gives people the opportunity to go like, okay, I'm going to get what I need here, and then I'm going to try to get over to that. Also, we're human beings. Some people need to duck out and use a restroom, so they'll know like, okay, so we have a 60-minute presentation. The last like 15 minutes are Q&A. I'm going to duck out because I'm going to need to. And then finally, people who are neurotic note takers like me, just helps them kind of like format what they're doing. So people just inherently like to know what's going to happen in a set amount of time. As I said earlier, when you're developing your content and you're laying out your slides, I'd avoid a wall of text. It's hard to read. We've just seen that. And I would also, I would rely on those personal notes and not necessarily looking at your slides for all of your information. While it's double the work, I find really helpful to have two separate documents, having your slide deck, if you're doing one, that's for your audience, and then having your supporting notes in whatever format feels comfortable for you, in which you can write all of the things that you want to make sure are covered and hit, and you can have those two things separate. But really making sure that your presentation is for the audience to go like, okay, what's the point of this? Like, what am I getting? What are we talking about? So I can both read really quickly and listen to what's being told to me. Beyond what the written word is saying on your presentations, I think that we do have speakers who are incorporating video and Zoom, graphs, pictures. For any type of video or Zoom scenario, I recommend that speakers use closed captioning for both videos and for any call-in speakers. That's a number of different things. So you have somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing. That allows that person who is accessing the presentation and they're participating in this, they can understand what's being still presented without missing out on any of that content. Additionally, if you have, like, let's say you are doing you have a video that you're showing, and for some reason, we hope not, the audio doesn't work. It happens. Technology is not always great. We all know that. Technology can be really frustrating. Say your audio is not working for your video. You still have a secondary way that people can access a video. So you don't have to go like, how am I going to skip the next 5 minutes? But I like so much of my presentation is crucial to this. So having that closed captioning is really helpful. And then also for anybody who's a non-native English speaker, closed captioning allows them to both hear what's happening and also read it. So it supports that the dual modalities effectively of how somebody can access that presentation. If they are kind of going like, I think I know what it is, I think I'm keeping track, but I also need an extra support. I know that I've used that in language classes myself, where I'm kind of like, I kind of get the gist, but I'm not catching every word. I think that's very helpful. For graphs, not as many people for our conference use graphs, but if you are, great. I recommend making your graphs easy to comprehend and to hone in on the relevant data. I think we've all seen those graphs in magazines and newspapers, on social media, where it's like you're getting all of these lines or pie charts or overlapping things, and there's just so much, and you're like, I can't take in what is actually being conveyed to me. Like, I am looking at this and I'm not seeing the change, or I'm not, there's a lot going on here. So I think that making the graphs easy to comprehend, like really streamlining it, and then also as you are presenting it, to synopsize what that graph is trying to convey in a sentence or two. So let's say you're showing a graph and it shows population growth of a city and also, I don't know, the decline of finances for a company. Like, let's say you have competing information and there are, a couple of different lines to make or connections to draw from that. I would just say in the presentation, in this graph, we can see the green line says this and the red line says that. So people who are also taking notes or are not visual learners or visual thinkers can easily get it without having to like sit there and kind of go like, I'm not deciphering this well. And then for pictures, sometimes we want to use a lot of graphics. We want to throw a lot of images in there. I would think very closely about what images you're going to use and if they inherently support your goal. If you have a slide and it has 15 different images, it's going to take the attendee or the person sitting in the chair looking at this a lot of time to go through visually each picture and kind of see what's happening, right? Because you, as the presenter, you put them in, you know what they are, but on the other side, this is a fresh thing for the attendees. So for them to look at it, to look at like, let's say 15 images and go like, okay, I think I get a sense of what's happening here in each one, that's going to pull more mental attention from what you're saying as they're computing that. So if you can tell the same story in 3 images, I think that's really effective. So thinking about strategically how to use a visual component. I also recommend including descriptive text with your images. And that's usually like 1 to 2 sentences that describe the appearance or the function. I have an example on the next slide for that. A couple of things I recommend reading that out. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but I recommend reading that out. I also recommend if you're intending to share your presentation or your slides afterwards, so like let's say you're going to upload them and you're going to send them to attendees, to have that either as alt text associated with the image or to have that written in the slide itself. If you have somebody who downloads a presentation and they're using like a reader on their phone or on their laptop or a tablet later on post-conference to access your presentation, and they are using something because they're blind or visually impaired, if they're using a reader, the reader can't describe what the image says, but the reader will be able to obviously read any text underneath. So I think that can be helpful if you're trying to use your presentation post-conference to still convey information. All right, so very quickly, how to write some good descriptive text. So I pulled this from last year from the Olympics. This is from Art News from their social media page. I just really like it. So you'll see the image on one side, and then here's the description on the other. So Art News, obviously, they have their little bit about Pharrell at the Olympics and being in Paris. What I really liked though was the ID at the bottom. So the ID reads, a Black man holding a torch and a white woman are greeted by a large crowd, many of whom are holding mini French flags. And there's text overlaid in the image that says, and then it restates the text. But I think that that's the first part is only 1 sentence. It gives you a very clear cut understanding of like, we have somebody that's in the center, we have somebody in the background, we have French flags. And you can start to build a visual image. So if you do have somebody who is blind or visually impaired, or is sitting in the back without their glasses on, this gives them a way to start to see the image or piece together what's in it without having full access to what's there. All right, so I've talked a lot about the structure of your presentation as you're developing it. So now what about day of? First and foremost, don't make assumptions about who's in the room. Let's say you have a really popular session and you have 150 people that are sitting there wanting to learn from you. You do not know the lived experiences of every single person in that room. You don't know how they're showing up. You don't know what they are bringing or what they need in any way, shape, or form to support their experience, right? You just know you have 150 people in the room and they are all wanting to learn from you. So we try not to make assumptions about who is there, and we try to incorporate as many accessible strategies to make sure that presentations are available for all of our attendees. So what does that look like? All right. Oh, my favorite part. So better practices, because this is an evolving thing. So using a microphone. My colleague Heather was going to laugh at this because this is what I do. I don't have a microphone at home, but I do have a spoon. If you have, well, I'm not going to say if you have a microphone, every room has a microphone. We make sure that our AV company knows that we need microphones in each space. Use it. Even if you're a loudspeaker, I do walking tours. I've part of a theater background. I can use a chest voice. I know how to do all of that. I'm a loudspeaker, still use a microphone. It is there to support all the people in the space. It just helps amplify and make sure that you can keep going for a good like 60 or 90 minutes of speaking at a louder register. So use your microphone. It is there not for you, but for the attendees. When you're using a microphone, what happens a lot, and oh, I should say all of our microphones are handheld mics. Or they're in a stand. They're not the lavalier mics that like pop onto your collar. So they're all going to be like what you think of a microphone. I see this a lot, that a lot of people think that like when they're using a microphone, that the microphone can drift. And then the microphone can be like down by your belly button, and then it doesn't pick up what you are saying. So when you're using a mic, what I recommend is that it feels invasive, but it's going to be near your face. It's going to be like almost bopping your nose. You're going to feel like you're almost touching with your lips. You're going to be like, it's going to be up here. You can adjust a little bit here and there. But really, like a lot of people start to do the drift if they're holding it, or they start to back away. So just make sure that like it's going to feel weird at first, but you get used to it. But just make sure that you're kind of aware that it's in your space. You're going to forget after a while that like, as you get close and you get used to it, it's there, but make sure you don't do the drift. If you have it like down by your belly button, it's not registering. The microphones are not that sensitive. I also always invite attendees to ask, to tell me if they can't see me or can't hear me. So, it's perfectly fine to start your presentation and go like, if at any point you can't hear me or see me, just like raise your hand, let me know. Because we want to make sure that anybody who's in the room feels like they're accessing your presentation and your information as best as they can. And they're not distracted by like, what were they saying? I can't hear them. It's perfectly fine to just be like, can you talk a little bit louder? You can get closer to the mic. When you're speaking or presenting, remember to speak at a comfortable, measured pace. Sometimes, especially if we're nervous, or we have a group that's bigger than we expect, and we're not naturally public speakers, then sometimes we can start to talk from a throat voice and get really high pitch and start to go really, really fast, and we start to kind of creep up here because we're getting nervous. Remember to take a deep breath, and then just like drop it down, drop it back a little bit slower. It's okay to talk a little bit slower than you naturally would. It's okay to think about the enunciation of your words. You're doing something fantastic. Don't like, you can have the nerves, you can use that. We'll talk about that later. But like, if you're finding that you're starting to talk up here and you're going really, really fast and you're finding that it's really hard to keep up with yourself and you can't breathe, take a deep breath, take it a step back. As you're presenting, remember to face your audience and refrain from covering your mouth. So although the microphone's going to be up here somewhere, it's not going to block your whole face. Remember that your best projection is going to be forward facing towards your audience. You don't want to be looking at your slide the whole time, looking off to the side. That's partly so you're facing the microphone, also partly for anybody who's not necessarily a non-native English speaker, or somebody who has low hearing or is deaf, and they need to rely on your face for cues around what you're saying. It's important that they see the lower half of your face in particular, that they see your mouth to understand shapes of what words you're saying. Sometimes we have speakers who are they're wanderers. They like to be kinetic in the space. Perfectly fine. If you're somebody that does that, just make sure that you're keeping in mind the sight lines between you and the audience. So let's say you're kind of walking the space and you're dynamic, and you have somebody that's either interpreting, so doing ASL, or you have closed captioning on the screen, that you're not between those two things. You don't want to be a block. What's the adage, like, you make a better door than a window? You don't want to be a block in between the two. And then I always like to, during Q&A, I like to repeat questions back to the group. For a couple of different reasons. First, I like to make sure that everybody in the group hears the questions being asked, that they understand. So I think we've all been in those presentations where you just hear the answer, but you're like, I don't understand the context. Like, what is this person responding to? Additionally, though, it's a nice check-in with the person that's asking the question to go like, okay, I heard this way. Is this what you're asking me? So you can either repeat it back verbatim, or you can kind of like synopsize, like, oh, you're asking this question about accessibility. And just make sure that you're like, because I think we've also all been in those situations of like, you answer the questions like, that's not what I meant when I asked you. It's like duality of language. That makes sense. So that repeat back is also really helpful to understand what's being said, but also to make sure that you're on the same page as that person. All right, continuing by the practices, we said this earlier, or I said this earlier, provide a brief description of your images. So that 1 or 2 lines that are on your presentation, you can just say those out loud. It takes 10 seconds at most. You don't have to like rewrite a paragraph to say what's happening in the image. I think that it's just very helpful to say, like, in this image, we can see a Black man holding a torch at the center and a white woman in the background and people holding French flags. That's all it takes, so people can build that visual image if needed. I also like to give a brief synopsis of a video before playing. That just gives people that it's like, again, that road mapping, the sense of like, okay, what journey are we going on? Also, if somebody has to duck out and use the restroom, because it happens, it gives them a nice sense of like, okay, I have a 3-minute video, I got to run out and come back. I can do that. Here's what I'm probably going to miss, but it'll be okay. If you ask for some type of action in the room, that relies on like you're trying to convey a visual aspect of it, I would just recite that back. So let's say you want to ask like how many people have had 4th grade school trips in the month of October, and then half the people in the class in the room raise their hand. I would just say, like, ask the question, be like, okay, so we have about 100 people in the space, you can eyeball it, and about half are raising their hand. So anybody who is blind or visually has low vision or doesn't want to like, turn around to see what's going on, or they're taking notes, they don't have to try to get that information themselves. You're conveying that back to them. And then last but not least, to go back to this Q&A idea, if you have multiple speakers, it's just really nice to state your name when answering, especially if you have a ton of people. So last year we had a panel that I think had 6 speakers on it in the end, all same organization, but different parts of it. I think it's really nice to just say like, oh, okay, that question's for me. I'm Jen Wilson, I'm from NEMA. And then answer, especially if you have a question that's going to be answered by like 2 or 3 people on a panel of many. It's a nice way to just reinforce who's who, but then also just to give that context of like, if somebody in the audience can't see the person answering, I'm just like, oh, okay, this is Jen, she's NEMA. Okay, got it. All right, so some helpful hints to consider and what to expect. So in the room where it happens, each room is equipped with a screen, a projector, and basic cords to connect your computer to the projector. And then each room will have a set of microphones. Microphones are, I think we have 2 microphones per room this year, if I'm correct. For the microphones, they can be used by the speakers up front. Also, they are wireless. Excuse me. So for the wireless microphones, if you do have a Q&A and you want to float a microphone through the space, that's okay too. So the space does have that. If you have additional needs, there are some things that you need to let me know about so I can equip them. So if you are presenting, let's say you have a song or you have a Zoom call or you're hosting showing a video, let me know so I can let the AV company know that you are using sound. If you have a speaker who is zooming in, which is something that we do have, let me know so I can set up a Zoom link and I can again let the AV company know. And then for some folks, they do want some material goods. So they want like flip charts, easels, all of that. If you have some like material things that you need in the space, we do supply some of those, some basic things. You can let us know and then we'll try to make sure that's in the room before your session starts. Generally, we have at least a half an hour on Wednesday and Thursday between sessions. On Friday, we have a shorter span of about only 15 minutes. I'd recommend getting to the room at least 15 minutes early or 10 minutes early so that way you can feel comfortable in setting up, connecting your computer to the projector if you're showing anything, and making sure everybody's accounted for. Additional reminders. Please, 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 please save your presentation in multiple ways. I recommend at least 2 or 3 different ways, one of them internet-based and one of them not. So, save it on a thumb drive, on the cloud, Google Drive, on your laptop, email it to yourself, email it to your co-presenters. I recommend this because we never want this to happen, but technology can fail us. So let's say you wake up the morning of your presentation and your computer does not start and it is only saved on your laptop. We're going to have an issue in getting your presentation up. But if you've also emailed it to yourself, or you've saved it to the cloud, or it's on Google Drive, or whatever have you, we can probably find you another laptop somehow and still access your presentation to show. Put it on a thumb drive so that way, like, for some reason you can't log into your email, it happens, you have another way to kind of share it. So please save your presentations in multiple ways. It's just a nice safety net in case something goes wrong. We don't want it to happen, but that's the world we live in. Please remember to bring your chargers. Their first conference for NEMA that I did, we had a speaker who forgot his charger. He had a computer charger. He could not find anybody else that had the same type of charger, and he went out and had to spend a lot of money to get one the morning of his presentation. And thankfully he was within driving distance and he had a car to do it. So just remember your chargers. Also, if you're on a Mac, please remember to bring an HDMI converter. So most of our cords will be able to support HDMI input like this. If you have a Mac, then you have probably one of these guys right here. You can get an HDMI converter. I think on the Apple website, they're about $70, but you can definitely get them for probably 10 if you are going for something off-brand. That's just a nice thing to have. Our AV company will have extras, but I don't know how many they're bringing. So it's nice to just have your own. As you're thinking about your presentation in the day of, and getting yourself ready and prepped, remember to pause the updates on your computer. So or do them in advance if they're coming. I don't know how many times I've opened up my computer to log onto a Zoom call, and then all of a sudden I'm just like, Zoom is just, it's doing an update and I didn't expect that. Or we've all had the updates from hell that somehow they take 3 hours and you're like, I have a call in a half an hour. So either try to do them in advance or pause them or put them off if you can until after conference. And then finally, if you are relying on handouts, NEMA will not be printing handouts for people. So if you have some that you want to use for your presentation, and it's crucial that you have them in person, please print them out in advance. Or we do have the option of you can upload handouts digitally, virtually to our website. I can drop the link in a little bit. And it is helpful if you upload those by November 1st. Heather goes through all the submissions and has to get them up. And by November 1st, we are straight out. So it helps to get them on sooner rather than later. And I'll send that out in this presentation and also via email in a little bit. Oh, my favorite part too. Okay, so reminders for our gentle reminders for our nervous speakers. Use it. That nervous anxiety that you have, that like the fluttering, I call them the beehive in the chest. Use that energy. So the human body feels anxiety and excitement in the same way. Like it's sweaty palms, it's like kind of like the tingling in your stomach. You're getting like a little like, ooh, I'm feeling the flutters. It's the same thing. It's a matter of interpretation of how you think about that energy. So if you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm so nervous about this presentation, instead reword it to I'm excited. And Simon Sinek has a great like 3-minute YouTube video on this idea of like changing over nervous anxiety to excitement. I recommend just reading it or watching it, it's really just, it's a nice little reminder of like, okay, I can be nervous, but I'm just going to think about like I'm excited. And then that just like even telling yourself that can rewire your brain of how you're going into this presentation. Introduce yourself silly. This is a line I do walking tours on the side. This is a line that I write into all of my scripts for all of my walking tours. My very first walking tour that I did, I was so nervous and so excited to do this. I completely forgot to introduce myself. I was just like, we're going right into content. And then probably about 5 minutes in, people were like, who are you though? So after that, I just built in a line that says, introduce yourself, silly. And to a point where I have a number of friends and colleagues who, when they're writing their own notes for presentations or walking tours, will put this in as well, because it's just a funny little reminder. But I say all of that because you can remind yourself in your own notes of the important things that you want to cover. So your presentation, your slides are out there for the attendees. You can have your own set of things that really are important for you. And it can be, it can be anything. It can be introduce yourself silly, so little reminders. It can be like you're highlighting, like, I really need to emphasize this point. It could be, I always say this, this statistic off and it's never right. So here's exactly how I need to read it. It can be minute markers of where you should be. It could be smiley faces if that just is like, it's a confidence booster, whatever it is, but your notes are yours. Feel free to rely on them in the way that best supports you. As you are giving your presentation, it's important to pace yourself. We talked about that that nervous voice and that like that kind of creeping up here. Sometimes we also forget about how much time we have. What I like to do is I have a clock app on my phone, and it literally just sits on a desktop or on a table, and it overrides my blank screen, and it tells me exactly what time it is. So I know that it's 12:38. I know that I'm about 2 minutes from wrapping up for Q&A and such. But it gives me that visual reminder without having to check my watch all the time. Of just like, I can just glance and be like, okay, I know what time it is, I'm good. And that can also give you a sense of like, okay, I need to vamp a little, I'm going too fast, or it's like, oh, I need to skip a couple of maybe like lesser points because I've gotten off track. Additionally, remember to breathe. We forget sometimes to just breathe. It's important. Take deep breaths. In public speaking, we're reminded often that taking a deep breath will help ground you, but also on the listener side, like when we take a deep breath, it can feel like forever. You're like, oh, that breath was like 15 seconds long. I wasn't talking. Honestly, taking that deep breath feels longer for you on this side because you think you should just keep going. It's not noticeable on the listener side though. So taking a deep breath, getting yourself focused, just getting your bearings whenever you need it, that's important. Nobody's going to criticize you on that. So remember to breathe. It is crucial. But you can take a deep breath. You can like get a breath that goes into your chest and into your belly if you need to. That's going to help you if you're nervous to feel more centered in the present tense. And then last but not least, give yourself a lot of grace. You're human. You're doing something great and amazing. If you're nervous, that's fine. Like it's to be expected. You're not nervous, you're excited. But give yourself a lot of grace, right? Especially if this is a first time presentation for you, or let's say you have 200 people in the room and you're not expecting it. That's fantastic. Give yourself some grace. You're doing a great job. I also, sometimes it's helpful to say like, something that's just like, I'm really nervous. Like I did this once in a presentation where it was a bus tour. It's my first bus tour. And I was like going backwards and I was kneeling. It was a whole big thing. Anyway, I missed talking about a historic site as we were passing it on this bus tour. And then we get off the bus and one of the attendees comes up and he's like, why didn't you talk about that thing? It's like, my honest response was like, I was so nervous about getting all of my content right and staying upright, and I'm sweating through my blazer right now that I forgot it. And I was just honest, and he kind of laughed. He was like, I get that. That's fine. That can help break the tension. And sometimes also being vulnerable is human. I was just like, I'm sweating through my blazer. I am so sorry. It's happening. He's like, cool. I got it. That's fine. You're doing something amazing. And, I think vulnerability is really human and really powerful. All right. I think that's everything I have. We have a few minutes left for Q&A. All right, so if you need anything in the next 50 some odd days, please let me know. There are two different emails you can get a hold of me. So at conference@nemanet.org, or the email that I've been emailing you all from is my own personal one. So jennifer.wilson@nemanet.org. Either or, we're a super small staff. So if you email conference, it will get to me. And obviously, if you email me, it will get to me. I'm here for anything you need at all. So if you want me to review your presentation, you have questions about what's in the room, anything that comes up, please let me know. This is what I do. This is my job, is to make sure that you are successful at conference, and it is my pleasure. So really take advantage of that if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And then thank you so much for being here. We're going to segue to our Q&A. So ask anything you have, session related or conference related, because right now, Heather is here. I think Amy is here as well, maybe. So we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Yeah. So what have we got? Oh, you're welcome, Laura. My pleasure.
Can I jump in with just a very basic question, which is when
course.
you need submissions, what's the time frame? I've missed that on the site, so.
Oh, that's okay. Submissions for what exactly?
Oh, for the presentation, like, are you expecting us to be submitting? No, you don't need us to do that. All right, that's helpful.
Yeah. So once your session is accepted, you are good to go. NEMA does not review all of the presentations. We don't kind of go through all that. Other conferences may. We're a super small staff, trying to do a very big conference. So yeah, we trust you. You're good. But if you do want me to review anything, let me know.
Well, that's helpful to know too.
Yeah.
Thank you. And your tips, appreciate you taking the time to go through all that as well.
Anytime. Yeah.
I do have a question as well.
Yeah. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you for your presentation. It was very helpful. So this will be my first time presenting, or being in charge of presenting, I guess. Do you recommend a certain type of, software or presentation, like Canva or Google Slides or things like that?
Yeah, whatever feels most comfortable for you. So everybody uses something different. I made mine on Canva because I like the fact that it can like pre-populate formats for me and I don't have to worry about it. And all I have to do is like play with some colors. That's great. Some people love doing Google presentations, whatever feels most comfortable. I think on my end, my recommendation is more so make sure you have access to it in a couple of different ways. So if you're doing it on Google, make sure you do download it as like a PDF or something.
Okay.
But yeah, whatever feels most comfortable.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I'd also recommend probably downloading it as a PDF if possible, because that can be read by multiple sites or multiple programs versus like if you have a Word presentation, then like that may be hard. I know my computer does difficulty in like translating that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense and I'm also thinking Wi-Fi issues or things like that. The PDF download makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Jane had a question in the thing about the number of participants. Unfortunately, that is not something we know in advance. We don't ask people to sign up in advance to go because that creates a different type of headache on our end. But if you do check the Whova app, sometimes people will say that they're interested in that session. That's also like how many people want to go to a Facebook event. So keep that in mind. But it does give you some idea of interest.
Sunny, I'm glad to see you also have a theater background. I came to museums entirely with like a theater English major background, and I was like, there's not gonna be a lot of overlap, and there is. So glad you have that. It's a nice skill to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was in the back having lunch, but I'm really excited, and it's just so interesting. I'm working with Alex Lenning on mental health literacy and in different spaces, and I just chuckled because 10 years later, I could have been in a very different place, and I somehow crossed paths with you all anyway. So I'm really looking forward to this opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I look forward to meeting you in person in a few weeks. Yeah. Advice for first-time NEMA panelist presenters. Oh, for co-panelists. Let's see.
You guys have a few on that session.
You do. Yes, you do. I recommend for co-panelists, especially if you're going from like presenting on your own to having multiple people, rehearsing with a group of who's doing what, and getting a sense of how much time each person has, especially if you're doing 60 or 90 minutes. I think that's really helpful. I have seen presentations where people have not rehearsed, and then the first speaker is, they have a 60-minute session, they go on for like the half hour. That can be tough. So making sure you know what your allotted time is and sticking to it. Knowing, I think, in advance who, if anybody's acting as a moderator, is helpful. Both in like introducing the sections if you need that, or who's going to run the microphone for Q&A, and rehearsing that, or at least like designating those roles in advance. And then
questions. What if questions come from the audience?
Oh yeah. So if questions come from the audience, who's going to tackle that and what feels most appropriate? Again, like repeating the question back. Is it the person who is taking the microphone? Is it the moderator? Is it the person getting the question? And then repeating your name back when you're answering, especially if it's multiple people.
It's also sometimes better to hold the questions until the end of the presentation, just because sometimes the questions can start to eat into other presenters' time as well.
Yeah. I would definitely, for most scenarios, if you're doing a presentation that's a bit more formal, I'd save Q&A to the end, unless you are trying to do something that's interactive. Those are kind of off the top of my head things. Also, whose computer are you using? Are you emailing the presentation to everybody? And also setting your meetings in advance, so like you're all touching base sometime before the conference, if possible. Cool. Anything else? The museum educator in me is always like, I can't wait, all of you. All right. So I will say you've had some great questions. If anything comes up, because I'm one of those people, it's like 2 a.m. of like, oh, I didn't ask the thing and I meant to. Email me anything that you have. I am here for you. I am neurotically on my email. And I try to get back to you within a few days, unless, there's a lot of stuff happening. But yeah, let me know of anything that you may have. We are also later in October, we're doing a first timers meeting. So if you are a first time in NEMA, you're welcome to. That was my Rhode Island accent slipping in my NEMA. Yeah. I've not had enough coffee today.
It's Friday.
It's Friday. If you're new to NEMA, you're more than welcome to join. And also if you're a vet and like you really you've come to NEMA several times and you want to share your perspective, we love having that too. So that link is in our calendar already, and I'll send that out too. As I'm going to send you more reminders. You're going to just keep hearing from me. So yeah, great. All right. Thanks everybody. Have a great weekend and go enjoy the sunshine, and we'll see you in 50 some odd days. Yay. Bye.